Right, morning fellas, welcome back to another Villa on Tour video today. Doing something slightly different. Today I'm going to be ranking football derbies from up and down the United Kingdom. Now, we all look forward to our football derbies. If your club doesn't have a football derby, is it really worth going to the football? Anyway, I know there's going to be a lot of people from lots of different clubs watching this, so please don't get offended by what I'm going to say. If you don't agree with what I'm going to say about your club, that's fine. Just don't get angry at me in the comments. I can already picture them now. But listen, we're all entitled to our own opinion. Leave yours in the description. No, not in the description. Leave yours in the comments if you don't agree with me. If you do, brilliant. If you don't, let me know. What is your top 3 football derbies from the United Kingdom? Let me know. But just before we do continue, quick shout out to OneFootball. Best footballing app out there. If you support any club up and down the country, even in Europe, they are the app for you. They got stats, they got transfer news, which is obviously a hot topic at the moment as we get closer to deadline day. So top link in the description. It's free as always, so download OneFootball. Why not? So, I've got 16 derbies here. I'm going to go from sort of when we talk about derbies, we're thinking, you know, fierce hatred between the sides. I'm not talking about, you know, the quality of the sides, because obviously the Premier League derbies would be top, but they're not. So I'm talking about how fierce they are, the hatred, you know, the history, things like that. So as I said, I've got 16. I'm going to start from the least fierce, and then at the end of the video, it will be my top derby in the United Kingdom. So without further ado, on to the derbies. Number 16, Ipswich versus Norwich. Now, I love Ipswich. I think they're a really good club, massive club back in the day. Norwich, not so much. It's a tough one, this, because they're not really massively supported clubs, and I think they're a bit nice, you know what I mean? I don't think that sort of hatred and passion is really there. You know, I think it's an okay derby. They're not exactly close either, Ipswich, Norwich, so for me, not the biggest derby in the world, and that's why I've put them 16th. Number 15, is this actually even a derby? Brighton versus Crystal Palace. So obviously Palace are situated in South London. Brighton, I think it's about 45 miles down on the south coast. Obviously they're not even close. Like, I don't know where this sort of originated from. I think, you know, Brighton, were they looking for a rival? Palace don't exactly have a, you know, a designated London rival, you know, like your London, like your Tottenham, Arsenal, you know, things like that. So I just think it's a bit of a weird one. I watched a Copper 90 documentary on the whole Brighton Palace thing. Still don't really get it. It's a bit of a weird one, and that's why I've put it 15th. Number 14, the South Wales derby, Cardiff City versus Swansea City. Strange one again, they're not in the same city, which I think is a bit of a weird one, but I think the derby originates because they are the two only good sides, well, I say good-ish sides in Wales. Obviously you've got Newport and things like this, but they're not on the same level as Cardiff and Swansea, so it's a bit of a strange one. I did watch their game a couple of weeks ago, I think it was, when they drew 0-0. Worst game I've ever seen in my life, honestly. It was dreadful, the quality was just awful, but you know, it's two best sides in Wales, relatively close in terms of geographical, but yeah, not a little bit fierce. You saw the old Ollie McBurney thing that was going on a couple of weeks ago when he was in the Swansea away end, but for me, not a massive derby. Number 13, this may surprise a few people, but I've gone with the Merseyside derby. Now, just before we continue, I just want to say that I don't think Premier League derbies are very good. I just think the Premier League is a little bit too tourist based, and I just don't think the Premier League derby's there because, you know, it's, you know, just ruined by money and TV and things like this. I don't think the origin and passion is really there with Premier League derbies. Don't want to upset anyone, but I just think the Merseyside derby, I've been to Liverpool a few times. I think Liverpool as a whole community, as a city, is very, you know, united and, you know, Scouse, not English, that whole thing. So I think some people have referred to Everton Liverpool as a friendly derby. I think it is still fierce on match day, but when match day's not there, I think, you know, Liverpool and Everton fans are mates. I love the way they've come together with the whole Hillsborough disaster and justice for the 96. Fair play on that. That's brilliant to see. But for me, not massively fierce, although they are in the same city, which is good, but nah, not for me. Number 12. Portsmouth versus Southampton. Now, these two sides haven't played each other in recent years too much. They played in September, I think, in the Carabao Cup when Southampton went to Fratton Park and just battered them 4-0. The limbs there were pretty dreadful for a derby, but that's Southampton for you, isn't it? I think Portsmouth, proper club. If they'd have scored at, you know, St Mary's, for example, like they did, I think it was to stay up, when, I think it was a few years ago when Southampton needed something to go up and Portsmouth needed something to stay up, and I think Portsmouth scored like a late equaliser and it was just absolutely class. Portsmouth, proper club. Southampton, Not so much. But I think, like I referred to earlier, when they played each other in the September in the Carabao Cup before the game, it was very, very lively outside the ground. So it's a decent derby. I think it's slightly underrated, but for me, I've put it in 12th place. Number 11, Blackburn versus Burnley. You know, the North West is a very, you know, football-centric sort of area of the UK. Two proper clubs in Burnley and Blackburn. Blackburn probably the bigger club. Obviously, they've won the Premier League. But for me, it's not massively fierce. Like I said, there's lots of clubs up there. Preston, Wigan, Blackpool, Burnley, Blackburn, blah, 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 blah. Just things like that. So there's lots of clubs up there. I just don't think this is up there with the biggest derbies, but even still, they've played each other a few times in recent years, and it's always been pretty feisty. So I like that. Proper derby, proper clubs, can't go wrong. So then, breaking into the top 10, in 10th place, I've got Manchester City versus Manchester United. Like I talked about with the Merseyside derby, I just think it's a bit tourist based, and if you go to either Old Trafford or the Etihad on derby day, it's just not feisty enough. Like I talked about, the Sky TV will big it up massively and it will probably end up being a pretty bad game. I just don't see the two sides as proper football clubs anymore, just because, you know, the history they've got and the fan bases now are, you know, pretty worldwide and it's tourist based. I just think, yes, it's lively, but it's not proper passion. Also, I think there's an element of, back in the day, Manchester United were heavily dominant over Man City, but like that, it's just switched and Man City pretty much always beat Man United. I know this season, obviously, United won at the Etihad, but, you know, overall, City have had the better of it in recent years. 9th place, Derby versus Nottingham Forest, the two biggest clubs in the East Midlands. Obviously, these two sides have been playing each other in the Championship in recent years, and it's always been pretty lively. I remember in 2015, I think it was, Forest scored a late winner at Pride Park, and it was just absolute carnage. Forest, proper club. Derby, proper club. You can't go wrong when two proper clubs are in a massive rivalry like that. So I really like it. 8th place, I've gone with the Bristol derby, Bristol Rovers versus Bristol City. Now, I don't think these two sides have played each other since 2013 or something like that, so I can't, you know, claim to have watched a lot of Bristol derbies because I haven't. But from what I've seen and from what I've heard people talking to me about the Bristol derby, it's a pretty feisty one. You know, back in the day, I think there was a massive pitch invasion. You know, Bristol City, obviously, in recent years have been much better than Bristol Rovers. Probably are the bigger club as well. But there you go. I think, you know, I'd love to see them play each other because they haven't played each other in such a long time. Now, I'd love to see these two sides play each other because it has been, you know, what, 7 years since they have. So when they come back together, it's going to be an interesting one. Number 7, another Premier League derby, Liverpool versus Manchester United. Now, it's quite controversial me saying that this is bigger than the Merseyside and the Manchester derby. You know, that is controversial. Let me know if you do agree with that. But for me, I just think, yes, they're not in the same city, but they are obviously the two biggest clubs in the United Kingdom, no doubt about that. And yes, Man United have, you know, had the better of it in, you know, the last 10-15 years, but now Liverpool, what can you say about Liverpool? They're absolutely flying. They demolished Man United a few weeks ago, or last week, whenever it was. So, yeah, it's okay. It's hyped up all the time by Sky Sports, saying, oh, it's the big one. But then again, when you watch the game, it's pretty boring. But like I said about the other Premier League derbies, it's pretty heavily tourist-based. Not for me. Approaching the top 5 now, but just before that, in 6th place, Sheffield United versus Sheffield Wednesday for me. Again, like Derby and Forest, the Sheffield club, proper working class city, which I like. United have done some ridiculous things in the last couple of years, going from League One to, you know, 7th, 8th in the Premier League. Fair play to them. Sheffield Wednesday have been in the Championship for way too long, in my opinion. I'd love to see them back in the Premier League over the likes of, you know, Bournemouth, Brighton, Watford, these sorts of clubs. No offence to them, but I just want to see the proper clubs back in there. It's always tasty as well, and how can you forget? I think it's when Sheffield United won 4-2 at Hillsborough a couple of years ago, when the Sheffield Wednesday fans were bounced up and down, chanting, going mad. Sheffield United go at the other end, score. Into the top 5 now. In 5th place, it's the last of the Premier League derbies, Arsenal versus Tottenham. I don't think there's any doubt about it. I think this is the best derby in the Premier League, but again, it's kind of tourist based, but I think there's, you know, proper London clubs there. Arsenal, obviously, massive club. probably had the better over Tottenham in the last few years. Tottenham, they've come out of nowhere recently with Pochettino going in and doing really, really well. They've, you know, won at the Emirates a couple of times. You know, in the Carabao Cup, I remember Dele Alli lofting the keeper, and that was absolute scenes. So obviously, Arsenal have won the league at White Hart Lane, which was just absolutely mental. Decent clubs as well. Tottenham, when they played at White Hart Lane, loved that ground. Arsenal at Hillsborough as well, loved that ground as well. It's a shame they both play in sort of like bowl stadiums now, but it's always tasty. If they played each other this season, yeah, Arsenal won, I think. Did they win? I'm not sure. But for me, decent derby, can't go wrong. Fourth place, Millwall versus West Ham. Obviously this one for me is in fourth place for a reason. They haven't played each other in years and years. It must be 7, 8 years or something like that. Working class clubs. It's a shame West Ham are in that stupid stadium now. Millwall, the Den, it's very, very intimidating. Millwall, they're what do you say about Millwall? And I just think, you know, the police just simply don't want this derby to happen because it always causes just absolute carnage. I'd love to see this derby happen though. Well, obviously West Ham might be going down this season, hopefully they do, and then they could play each other in the Championship, which would just be absolutely mad. Hopefully that does happen. I'd love to see it happen because I can't remember the last time it happened. Can't remember sitting down and watching a Millwall West Ham game, so I'd love that to happen. Mad. Right then, into the top three. This is where it gets controversial. For me, third place, Sunderland versus Newcastle, the Tyne-Wear derby. Yes, they're not in the same city, but for me, the North East is just extremely passionate about football. Sunderland and Newcastle, both big, big clubs. It's a shame to see Sunderland just dip in recent years, go all the way down to League One, and they're struggling at the moment, which isn't nice to see. But they have, even still, in recent years in the Premier League, had the upper hand over Newcastle. I remember they won 3-0 at St James's Park, and Di Canio doing the classic knee slide and things like that. Brilliant to see, but for me, it's a very, very tasty one. Passionate area of the country in terms of football, so massive, massive derby. In third place, Tyne-Wear derby. So then the top two, we've got Villa Blues left and we've got the Old Firm derby. You may expect me to be a little bit biased and say Villa Blues top in the country, but no, I've put Villa Blues in second place. Now obviously being a Villa fan, I'm maybe being a bit biased putting it this high on the list, but I don't think I am. We hate Blues, they hate us. They may see us as being a little bit arrogant because we go on about winning the European Cup, and yes, history have obviously got the upper hand over Blues, but the only thing they've got over us is that they've won a trophy more recently than us, which is a little bit frustrating. Obviously our last trophy was in '96, theirs was in 2011 I think it was, when they beat Arsenal. So fair play for that, you can't really argue with that, but in terms of history, in terms of fan base, stadium, it's only Villa. And of course I think the last time Blues beat us was in 2011 on their route to winning the League Cup, and in the league I think it must have been 14, 15 years ago since they beat us. So what can you say? Obviously we've had the upper hand in the last few years with the whole Grealish thing, beating them 4-2, 1-0, 2-0 at our place. I can go on. But for me, two proper clubs, Villa, Blues, both big clubs, and when they go together, Derby Day, there's nothing quite like it. The week leading up to Derby Day, everybody hates it. Even, you know, if you are the favourite, which Villa are most of the time, you still hate it. On the day, you hate the game, you just feel sick. But as long as that final whistle goes and you've got the result, that is when the party starts. But for me, I think Villa Blues is the best derby in England, no doubt about that. Two proper clubs, and yeah, the hatred is just unbelievable. But on to first place, Old Firm derby, Rangers versus Celtic. There's a lot of history there with religious beliefs and, you know, Celtic being the Catholics and things like this. Rangers obviously got the upper hand over Celtic at Celtic Park a couple of weeks ago, I think it was the end of December. Absolute scenes. For me, I'm a massive fan of Rangers over Celtic. Obviously Celtic have got the Irish connection, and you know, Rangers like to see themselves more of, you know, connection to the United Kingdom and British flags you can see all over Ibrox, which I absolutely love. Absolute class that is. Celtic have had the upper hand over the recent years, there's no doubt about that. Probably won the last 8 titles or something stupid like that. But Rangers winning at Celtic Park a few weeks ago, unbelievable. For me, the absolute hatred there and the fact that the away team only gets like 800 tickets when they go to the opposition ground is just absolutely mad. And I'd love to go to an Old Firm derby one day. I just think it'll be, like, the atmosphere is just absolutely incredible. I'm going to Rangers in a few weeks though, for their Europa League game against Braga. Hopefully that happens, hopefully we can get tickets there, so can't wait for that. It's going to be unbelievable. Two massive clubs, two biggest in Scotland, obviously. And yeah, for me, that is the biggest derby in the United Kingdom. Yes, they play each other like 40 times a season, but for me, still, unreal derby. Whew, that is just my opinion. If you don't agree with me, that is absolutely fine. Let me know in the comments what you're thinking. Do you agree? What is your top 3 or top 5 derbies? Do let me know. But without further ado, please do leave a like on this video. Subscribe if you are new. We are very close to 30,000 subscribers, which is mental. So thank you so much for that. Leave a like on the video. Thank you very much for watching. Up the Villa.